So do you know what irritates me?
Me?
Good answer. You really, really want to know what truly, deeply irritates me? Other than, hold music? Or seeing somebody with 12 items get in the 10 item or less line cash register? Human beings irritate me. You guys. Humans make me out to be the bad guy. And that's been going on for thousands of years now. And let me tell you, after the first, 500-600 years or so of being everybody's fall guy, everybody's excuse for what they did wrong, it kind of starts to get old. You get it, don't you? Take this guy out east in Uz. His name was Job. Job had it all. He was rich. He had thousands of head of livestock. He was righteous. He had a big family. He had everything. He was a happening dude, as the kids say today. He was one of those guys who just had everything going on and you just wanted to help him. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to help him understand what life was really like. And that meant making him understand that God doesn't give a single solitary whip for him. And I realized that to do this, I needed some help. So I went to God. I didn't tell God that last part about what I was trying to do. But I went to God. And I knew this would work because God had been talking Job up. I dropped by for coffee every week. And a week hardly went by that God wouldn't say, hey, did you see Job? So I went to God. And we made a bet. Oh, wait, this is Methodist, right? It wasn't a bet. we made an arrangement. The arrangement, was skin for skin, this for that. Quid pro quo, my Roman friends would say. And the arrangement was that I would be right about Job. And he would curse God. And if I was right, God would just, give me a gift for no apparent reason. And if I was wrong, and Job remained faithful, then I would give God a gift for no reason. It wasn't a bet. God was very sure that because God created all of you all, that you would love him no matter what. You always would love him. Especially Job would love him. And my end of the arrangement was that we would find out that people really didn't and wouldn't love him. Not with that same kind of breathless devotion that God thought of anyway. I was pretty sure you only loved God because of the stuff you got. You only loved God because of the rewards that you got for your faithfulness. Get it? God was so boastful, so stuck up in his confidence in his little pets, that he took you for granted. He took Job for granted. He couldn't imagine anything else. So I had to prove God wrong. But it was to help humans, of course. Because he was taking advantage of you. And that was wrong. And also because I knew the truth. I knew the truth. The harsh reality about human beings that God never quite seemed to get right, even though he made you in the first place. You like to think you're special, that nothing bad's ever going to happen to you. And if something bad does happen, you like to find a way to blame somebody else. And if you do something wrong, you always find a way to blame someone else. I knew that if you put the right pressure on somebody, anyone, you'd fold like an origami wombat. And I wanted God to know that. See how wrong he was. You getting it? So here's how it happened. We made this arrangement. And God said, do anything you want, except don't hurt him. So I did a little work, whispered in a few ears. And one day, bandits came. And they stole almost all of the livestock. And a messenger came running to Job and said, Job, all of your livestock has been stolen, except for the sheep over in the meadow. And your servants were killed, and I was the only one that got away. And that report had barely gotten in when another servant came running up, and he said, Job, the sheep were out in the meadow, and all of a sudden fire came down from the sky, and they all burned, and they're all dead. And so are your servants, and I'm the only one that got away from there. And Job was still trying to absorb the fact that he had just lost all of his possessions when a third messenger came. They told him that a great windstorm had come up out of nowhere, and it had knocked down the house of one of his sons, just as his family was sitting down to dinner. Wiped out all of his sons and daughters. Remember years ago they had the good news, bad news jokes? Where somebody would come in with some really bad news and then they'd say, oh, well, but there's good news. This was all bad news. And it was hysterical. Just watching it happen was more fun than I'd had since that whole Garden of Eden thing. Do you know what happened? Job sort of sat there. And he took it all in. And he said, well, you know what? I was born naked. I'm going to go out of this world naked. Stuff happens. I guess I have to take the good with the bad. Job, do you not get what just happened? You know, if God was annoying before about this, he was just totally insufferable afterwards. Next week when I went for coffee, God was just sitting there. Hey, how'd it go with Job? And I couldn't let him get away with that, so he went double for nothing, double or nothing. And I said, I'm still going to get him to curse you. And God said, hey, do your worst. You can do anything you want. You can do more than you did last time. Just, you can't kill him. Okay? Because that just sort of ends the whole game right there. And boy, I didn't kill him. I was pretty sure he wished I had, though. 'Cause you know what I did? I gave him boils. Nice, big, itchy, oozing boils from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. And he was miserable. He was miserable in a way that only somebody who's had them can be, and it was great. I just sat and I watched as he got worse and worse. And nobody that he went to could help. Nobody knew what was going on. You know, if it happened to him today, they'd probably name the disease after him. But when it happened then, all he could do was just sit there in the ashes of what he had used to have and scratch himself. And that's what he did. Until one day his wife came out and she said to him, "Job, you're a wreck. You're miserable. Why don't you just curse God and die? Why don't you just put yourself out of your misery? Yeah, put yourself out of my misery. Because you look gross, and it's really creeping me out." And you know what he did? This wretched, pitiful, disgusting scrap of humanity. This man sitting there among the ashes of everything he had ever owned, covered in boils, scratching himself. He said, I'll never forget it, he said, "Why should I only accept good from God and not the bad? I'll take it." If I could have choked him, I would. What do you do with someone like that? He was costing me big time at this point. Well, he would have been costing me if we'd had a bet, but I didn't have a bet. But here was someone who was clearly not grounded in reality, and it was making me crazy at this point. And I didn't know where to go from here, and then something incredible happened. I didn't even have anything to do with it. 3 of Job's good friends showed up to help. They came to mourn with him because they'd heard about everything that had happened. And their names were Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Think of them as Larry, Moe, and Curly. So Larry, Moe, and Curly show up, and they see how miserable he is, so they just sit there with him in the ashes. They don't know what to say. And they sit there for 7 days. 7 days. They don't want to speak because they see how deeply wounded he has been, so they just sit in silence. And after 7 days of silence, Job starts to crack. And he says, "I curse the day that I was born. Why couldn't I have just died the day I was born? Why was I allowed to live? Because if I had died, I could at least be at rest and be asleep." We're so close. Job was just now this close to making my point for me. He was ripped up inside, and you could see it and you could hear it, and he was this close to turning away from God. But then he stopped just short. And he chose instead to just kind of wallow in his own misery instead of directly blaming God. And at that point, I was pretty sure I'd lost my arrangement. And I couldn't believe it because you guys are just so good at blaming other people for your problems. I thought this was going to be a slam dunk. I was sure once something bad enough happened, Job would go ahead and blame God because, things happen and I get blamed all the time. I get blamed all the time because you precious little darlings can't take the fall for your own shortcomings. Made a sin? No, the devil made me do it. Rob someone? Steal something from somewhere? Cheat on your spouse? Kill somebody? Don't blame me. The devil made me do it. Isn't it remarkable how everything you do gets blamed on me when all I really do is come along and say what you're already thinking anyway? Isn't it remarkable how when you do something wrong and the consequences of what you did come back and smack you down, I get blamed for leading you down the wrong path. Here's an ugly truth I've learned over the years, folks. Most of the time, I'm not leading you down a path. I'm just running to try to stay ahead of you. The truth is, I didn't do anything to Job that might not have happened anyway. Maybe not all at once. And I only did it because God kept boasting about this righteous man. And then it finally happened. I wasn't the one who pushed him over the edge. I wasn't. On that day, when he finally did completely snap, you know who did it? Larry Mullen Curry. Because when he wished he had never been born, they took that as their opportunity to counsel him in his grief. And what they told him then just ripped the world right out from under him. And it put him on a collision course with God. I couldn't have been happier. But that's a story for next week.